The University of Hawaii football team is coming home. The abrupt closure of Aloha Stadium forced the school to find a new place to play, and it did, on the UH Mānoa campus. The university is working to get its practice field ready for primetime football, but what will games be like in this much smaller venue? How will Manoa residents be affected? And could the move be more permanent than temporary? Join the discussion. Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of insights on PBS Hawaii start now. Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Laura Yamada. Okay, we're just a month away from the first home game for the University of Hawaii football team at the Clarence T.C. Ching complex on the UH Mānoa campus. What used to be the practice field is being renovated after it was announced in December that Aloha Stadium would be closed indefinitely. Now, this season, 9,000 seats will be made available, and next season, the complex will expand to 15,000 seats. But that will still leave many fans out of luck if they want to watch a game in person. Tonight, our panel will discuss the excitement surrounding this opportunity, but also the uncertainty that often comes with any first-of-its-kind venture. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email, call, or tweet your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. All right, now to our guests. David Matlin has been the athletics director for the University of Hawaii since 2015. He holds an MBA from UH Mānoa's Scheidler College of Business. Prior to UH, he was a local business leader with more than 20 years of sports management experience, including 13 years at ESPN. Rob DeMillo is the sports director at KHON2 News and host of the Spectrum Sports Warrior Football pay-per-view broadcast. He also serves as the executive director and host of Bo's Football Final online and the Cover 2 Hawaii High School Football Weekly Show on KHON2. Dylan Armstrong is the chair of the Manoa Neighborhood Board. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree from UH Mānoa and works in the field of disaster management. And Tanner Hayworth was born and raised in Manoa. He is a third-year student at UH Mānoa and is the former sports editor for Kaleo o Hawaii. The campus newspaper has a circulation of 10,000 and is funded by student fees and advertising. So thank you so much, all of you, for joining us tonight. Very timely topic, even more so with what's happening in the world with pandemic and everything. So let's set the stage here first a little bit and get some of the basics. So David, let me go to you and talk about the construction. How is it going? Can you give us an update on that? Is it going to be ready by September 4th?
Yes, thanks very much for having me. The construction's on schedule right now. Still doesn't mean you don't go to bed every night, worrying what's next, because you learn a lot when you're doing an operational plan and a build out at the same time. But right now, all the bleachers are up. We're kind of fine tuning some of the electrical, some of the media areas for the media. We put in some portable press boxes, and some suites are starting to go in today, actually. So we're on schedule. Still more work to do, but we should be on target for September 4th.
So let's talk a little bit, I'm going to follow up a little bit with you. Let's talk a little bit about the budget going into this. So I believe it was $8.3 million. Tell about how that was broken down. How did you come up with the money, and how's that going as far as how that money is being managed and dispersed for use?
Yeah, for the funds right now, we're looking at about $9 million right now.
Okay.
That's with contingency too. So we include that in our budget. As far as funding, about $4.5 million has been privately raised, is coming through the UH Foundation from donations, such as the Clarence T.C. Ching Foundation, which gave a lead gift of $1.5 million. We also, from the Waterhouse Foundation, received $500,000, and from some other foundations and a lot of individuals. I mean, a lot of people, giving, just giving with their hearts. And we've used about $3.2 million of funds from repair and maintenance from the university's budget, but no incremental dollars were received. That was just from the funds that were there for repair and maintenance projects.
So you're confident at this point that you're going to have the funds you need to not only complete the project, but maintain this for as long as it's needed?
Yeah, well, we have to, necessity. Right now we probably have about 80 to 85% of the funds already for this project right now. And we're still fundraising, and we have some pretty good sizable gift opportunities out there. So yes, I am. We got to keep working though.
Sounds good. Well, let's talk to you, Rob, because you're tied into the sports community, of course. What's been sort of the buzz as far as this starts to, we're getting close here to September 4th. What's been the buzz? What's been the talk as far as how things are going and what your either questions or concerns are at this point?
Well, I had the pleasure of going to the field today. This morning,
You did?
there was their first practice for the Rainbow Warriors on Clarence T.C. Ching Field since they made the announcement in January that they would be playing games there. And so that was exciting because you got to see the players be able to get onto that field for the first time just a month away from playing Portland State on September 4th. And to see the progress has been pretty impressive from when the construction started to right now. I think obviously the concerns for most people was, how am I going to be able to go to the game? Because you're going from a 50,000 seat Aloha Stadium to a 9,000 seat Clarence T.C. Ching Field. And so that was the biggest concern. And the university made it very clear in the beginning that it's not going to be easy for everybody and that there were going to be levels to who can get tickets. And so once you got there and people were trying to figure out, am I one of the people that are going to get the tickets or not? I think then you start looking at some of the smaller things like, how long is this sustainable? How long is the Aloha Stadium project going to take? Is this going to be the long-term home? So there are going to be questions that continue for many, many years as the University of Hawaii plays on this field. But for the moment, as you look at playing in 2021, it looks like a field that can be played on, and construction's coming along. So at the end of the day, that's the most important thing.
And don't worry, David, we're going to circle back around to this because we're going to break down some of the things. I think there are several questions kind of embedded in there as far as what Rob touched on, so we're going to continue some of those points. But let me turn to you, Dylan, and talk a little bit about sort of the discussions with the community as far as having this, on campus and how that might impact the community. Talk a little bit about what's been discussed, where some of the concerns may be, and also how the communication has been going with UH.
Well, historically, Manoa Neighborhood Board, where I'm the current chairperson, has had a really good relationship with UH. We have a regular attendee who reports on behalf of the administration and actually the system. So I appreciate that level of continuity and informed communication. I think that the discussions between the community broadly really reflect not only what Rob just hit the nail on the head about, with the specific concerns about the facility and the needs of the program into the future, but obviously traffic, obviously noise, public safety considerations, and ultimately just the broader infrastructure, the roads, the access between Waialae and Lower Campus, the access between Lower Campus Road and King Street on the west side, and of course up in Manoa, Dole Street. There's one left turn lane onto University Avenue from Dole Street. So we're going to have thousands of cars leaving this game at one point in the evening to get back onto the H1. There's been a level of need for refurbishment for the H1 interchange for a number of years. So this is certainly something that's going to exacerbate that need. But ultimately, this all goes back to leadership. The pandemic was an opportunity to reimagine how we do things in Hawaii, how government meets the needs of the people. And to a certain extent, I think a lot of us in Manoa feel for the UH Athletics Department getting stuck at the last minute because of the unforeseen closure of Aloha Stadium. How did we get here? Why was it that there was this loss of seating capacity? This is more than just a, dispute between neighbors who are aggrieved about noise or traffic concerns and a government agency. This is ultimately about taxpayers, including those aggrieved residences. How are we going to be getting our money's worth as taxpayers for what's supposed to be a redevelopment of the stadium? Where is the responsibility from the stadium's part? Where's the leadership and the vision from the state of Hawaii? And why was it that UH was treated as the low priority?
Yeah. Well, David, I know you're not part of the Department of Transportation, or the full development plans for the Aloha Stadium, but no doubt you're within that circle of discussion. So as far as, to Dylan's concerns and to the community concerns that, not surprisingly at all, have come up, what has been discussed with you, or what have you discussed as far as trying to, at least in the interim, alleviate some of these problems, or what's been discussed that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, Dylan brings us some really good points. Obviously, traffic mitigation. He also mentioned sound. But as far as traffic mitigation, that seems to be one of the big concerns, and that's why there's been a lot of some people on my staff, as well as Elmer, who is at most of your neighborhood meetings, I believe. Dylan continues to talk about that, get feedback. We have a traffic consultant. What we're looking at mitigating is the more on the egresses, the more you can make it efficient to come in. So we're planning on selling out the entire lot on the inbound where you can't buy at the gate. So that should speed up the process a little bit. That's one mitigating factor. Also, some other people around town, like at Varsity Circle and the Japanese Chamber, they're planning on selling parking where people can walk over. So that would be a little bit off-site where people can walk on. We're still, you continue to tweak and evaluate. I mean, right now at 10,000, you're kind of similar to where you are at a sold-out Stan Sheriff Center. But as we go farther and expand, we'll have to look at more parking rides possibly. Good thing about the university, they have KCC and HCC, some of these other campuses where you could do parking rides to mitigate that. And that's something that we could implement when needed, but for surely when we expand. So there's a lot of ideas out there. Some of them we're implementing now, and some we're holding off on for the expansion also.
Now, Tanner, I want to get to you because you're boots on the ground. You're there with the student population and got your finger on the pulse. What have you been hearing overall, first of all, as far as how people are and students are feeling about this?
So I've been kind of feeling both sides. I do hear a lot of people who are either super into sports. Like I'm personally a guy that's like, I'm super excited about Clarence T.C. Ching being used because as opposed to driving all the way out to Halawa, trying to find parking at Aloha Stadium, and then having the idea, okay, now I got to drive home, and now there's going to be all this traffic trying to get home. I feel like as someone who was born and raised in Manoa, if I had the opportunity to just walk onto campus, like I'd take that any day. But there are also other students who, kind of feel like they've been kind of, gypped kind of a little bit. I do know I've heard, some stories here and there of certain, some track students who feel like the track was really damaged from a lot of situation. And I do know one person who did quit the track team because of all the construction that was going on. I do know some people that are very concerned, especially, because of the unfortunate situation that happened last week with the construction worker. There are people who are either concerned that maybe it's going up too quick, that, it looks a little bit shaky. So some people are a little bit concerned about that. But I also have friends who are not into sports saying yeah, I totally go now. Because if you're going to Aloha Stadium as a student and you weren't really interested in football, you're probably just going there to tailgate and then probably leave right afterwards, just have some extracurricular activities, students and mind you. So I think having that ability, especially because Clarence T.C. Ching Field, my bad, is right next to the dorms. It's literally walking distance from a lot of incoming freshmen who are either super interested in sports. You could probably say they could watch it from their window a little bit. Probably not the best view, but it's a lot of walking traffic, so it's probably going to alleviate a little bit of the traffic issue. I know I'm a person that will park by Manoa Marketplace and walk to classes just because you can. It's Manoa. It's a beautiful place to live, and I think it's a beautiful backdrop to have football. And I'm super excited, and I just hope that, we get it done. We do only have about a month left to go, and Dave did say, we're on schedule, but it is just a little concerning because of how close we are. Are we going to get this done? Is it going to be done in a safe manner? And is everyone going to get everything that they can possibly get out of it?
Dave, I want to give you a chance to respond too, because to your point, as far as, and also to you, Rob, too, because as far as people being able to go to the games. I mean, we're talking about 9,000 seats at this point, maybe 15,000 at its next phase. That's still beneath, 1,000 or so beneath what the season ticket holders are, about 16,000 or so. So when we start to actually look at the actual capacity, and even just taking the season ticket holders, let alone maybe the student section. What are we actually looking at here, Dave? And what are your concerns? Because the numbers don't seem to quite add up here as far as being able to really get enough people there who may want to go.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no question we're not going to be able to get everyone that would want to go when you're going from 50,000 to 9 or 15,000, or even if we ended up at 16,000. It's 16,000 ticket cut. We have 16,000 ticket commitments. That includes the student number also, band, and some other commitments that there are. We have commitments to the opposing team too, for our Mountain West partners. So 16,000 is the ticket commitments. So there's no question that, especially this year, how do you get 16,000 and 9,000? You can't do it. So what you can do is you can be transparent about what your process is, and the process was. Besides the commitments we have contractually with our conference, the students, which is a priority for us. What we've done is we've said it's based on your H Club membership and the years that you've been in service to break a lot of the ties. Mm-hmm. And what we've done is we've instead of someone getting 8 tickets at before, maybe the max they can get is 4, and some people might only be able to get 2. So more people can at least get some tickets. At the very end, what our plan is to hold some tickets back to season ticket holders or to people who've been committed to in the past that didn't get, and maybe they only get 1 or 2 games. At least they can get an opportunity to buy. Our goal is to at least take care of everybody with at least a game or 2. Not optimal, I'll be the first to admit it, but we had to pivot pretty quickly, and 9,300 is where we're at right now in capacity. Really good questions, and kind of feel people's pain. And like I said, again, it's not optimal, but we're trying to make the best of it by being as inclusive as possible.
So, Rob, why don't you add to that a little bit too, as far as sort of what you're hearing and information you're getting, as far as how things are being broken down, and where that leaves us as far as the number of tickets that will actually be available.
Yeah, like Dave talked about, I mean, it's impossible to take the amount of people that consistently bought season tickets at Aloha Stadium and then fit them into Clarence T.C. Ching Field. And I think the way that the University of Hawaii chose to do it is you had to create some kind of order. You had to make it so that you're as fair and balanced as possible, and you're rewarding people who donate to the program. And then the next level is you're rewarding people who continually bought season tickets over the years. But again, that's not going to work out for everybody. My father is a season ticket holder since the late 70s. And he wasn't a part of the first phone calls to get tickets, and so he wasn't sure if he was going to be getting tickets or not. I know that recently he got the call that he can get season tickets, and now he's just trying to decide if he's going to or not, because that there are less tickets available, they cost more now.
Wait,
right?
so just to make sure I'm clear, so for people who are going to be able to have those tickets honored, they would have gotten a call by now. Is that correct?
Well, I'm not sure about the
No, not
Dave can
necessarily. I
answer
see
better.
Dave shaking his head.
Yeah. No, we're in the process of still calling people. We're calling in priority order. So what happens is at the beginning, there's more seats to choose from, so it takes a little longer. So people are still being called. We probably anticipate in the next 2 weeks, most people will be called. And like I said before, is we're planning on holding back some tickets back by the season to offer them on an individual game basis, or maybe 1 or 2 games, so at least people can get something if they want. We feel that's the best way to go, to keep people engaged and to at least support our great fans.
Okay, I definitely want to get to some of the viewer questions that I have here, but I just want to have Tanner and Dylan weigh in a little bit as far as like when you're hearing how this is being broken down. What's the feeling with the students? What's the feeling with the community as far as if you feel this is fair? If you feel if there's some frustration here? Maybe I'll start with you, Dylan.
Well, when you live in a community of over 20,000 people, you get a range. I think most people who've communicated to me or to the board have been understanding that this is making the best of a tricky situation. It goes back to leadership. UH has not asked for this situation. They're pivoting and adjusting, which I appreciate. There's all of these issues relating to the change to TC Ching that we're going to work through. Certainly the neighborhood board's going to continue to have that conversation, particularly as we get into that rhythm of the season.
See
we've
how that actually feels.
we've got a few weeks to see how the parking and traffic kind of, adjust, right? But, there's also that element of a lot of the residents are fans and supporters of the UH Athletics Department. So there's these long-term questions. If the Aloha Stadium redevelopment is 4 years, and that's just the projection, how long is UH going to have to deal with these losses to capacity? What's the effects to the funding stream? Are there potential consequences for the Division I status of the Warriors because of the loss of seating? Are there effects to the TV contracts because of the loss of seating? I'm just a resident trying to figure out how that works. But at the end of the day, we are dealing with a very unique situation, a long-standing situation where this athletics department has some of the most unique logistical challenges in college football. So I don't know the answers to that. I'm curious if Dave, Rob, Tanner know, but I think we as citizens and taxpayers need to figure out, what is the state going to do about this? Because this might be more than 4 years.
And Tanner, I want you weigh in first, and then I'm going to get to you, Dave, about that, because I wanted to ask about the stadium situation right now. But just from the student viewpoint, as far as how many tickets may actually be available for students and how people are feeling about what's the sense right now?
Well, this is the thing about the student body and UH football. We are kind of a long way since like the June Jones days, the Sugar Bowl days. We had, a couple of solid years with Rolovich, and we did see like certain games with really good turnout. I think the one game I remember, the most recent one, was probably like the homecoming game in 2019. I think it was against Central Arkansas, I believe. I'm like really spitballing on the team right now, but I feel like right now, student interest in the football program is near kind of a low. Because I remember going to games for when I was working at Kaleo in the press box, and you were sitting across the stadium from the student section. And I could count on my two hands how many people were in that student section. And these were like Fresno State, San Diego State in 2019, which basically won us the West Division. And there was like probably like 30 people, maybe like 50. So I would like there to be, more seats for students. Like, I feel like the students that want to come to see UH football, they come for, living in Hawaii. They come for, we have a reputation at UH football. We're the team that everyone stays up until midnight on the mainland to watch. So being able to come here, come at like 4 p.m., be like, oh, wow, I can watch this in the afternoon, watch the sunsets, watch some great football. But in reality, it's just really hard to gauge how many students are actually going to come and how many of those seats are going to stay empty, while like a lot of season ticket holders aren't really going to be available to get those seats. So I'm sure, that's why I'm the student here sitting in the chair. I could never make that decision because I would want to say, oh, maybe the students have to prove, that they want to come to these games. But that's kind of a very, standoffish thing. Like you're trying to say, like, you guys don't like the football. You guys should be coming more. When in reality, a lot of people really enjoy the football. And I really do think having it on campus is really going to become kind of a new epicenter for a lot of, like, incoming freshmen, a lot of people that are super interested in football. And just kind of were either, because I know personally, I had no idea how the shuttle service worked for Aloha Stadium. And I was lucky enough that, my parents let me use their car sometimes. So, so driving out to Aloha Stadium wasn't an issue for me. But just being able to just be like, oh, I'm done with classes. Hey, tomorrow you want to watch the football game? Yeah, let's go walk down. Let's like just go pick up a snack at like Cane's and like let's go to the game. And I think that's going to be really amazing. But it's just really hard to gauge the interest because I just truly don't know the height of it.
Well, I definitely want to circle back with you, Dave, about generating student interest, but I got to get to some of these viewer questions, and some of them definitely have to do with the stadium capacity, what it was at Aloha Stadium, and sort of where the discrepancy is there. And also, knowing that there's going to be that discrepancy for a while in the amount of seats available, what are we looking at as far as the redevelopment of Aloha Stadium? I think the projection now is 2024, but I mean, a lot of these big construction projects, boy, they get very typically delayed, sometimes significantly. What can you tell us about where it's at, if it's on track? Do you see the potential for what's happening at UH to possibly be extended? Give us the update that you can.
Yeah, well, I was on a meeting recently with some stadium authority members, I think the last 2 weeks, to get an update. Originally right now there's, saying, 2024, which would be 3 complete years, depending on when it is in 24, it'd be 3 or 4 years that we'd have to be at Clarence T.C. Ching Field. We need to be prepared to pivot to go longer. I mean, it's tough to do a plan when you're not sure how long it's going to be, but we need to be somewhat agile. We know it's going to be 3 or 4 years at the least. Hopefully that's what it is. But we need to be agile enough and to have some contingency plans about what we do going forward if it becomes longer. That's really all you can do is control what you can control and prepare for contingencies.
Okay, so here's some questions about possible complementary alternatives. So we have a few people asking questions about showing the game elsewhere at the same time simultaneously, whether it's a big screen on the Stan Sheriff Center. That's Will and Pearl City talking about that, and if there could be elsewhere where people could watch the game for less money. Here's another one, a Mark from Facebook asking about putting fans in the Stan Sheriff for closed circuit, maybe overflow in a sense. And if the tickets are sold out, would the televised games be free of charge? That's Mike from Makiki. So a lot of people kind of asking about, okay, if this is a situation, we still want to go, tickets are sold out, do we have some other alternatives here that might be kind of a second best?
Yeah, well, let me start off with that. First of all, the Stan Sheriff Center is a great idea to sort on the big screen there. Right now, we're not going to be able to do that in year one. It's something we could look at in the future because first year we're permitted up to 10,000 people, which I think is somewhat pragmatic. Let's learn before we grow. So that's not possible for this year on campus. As far as, we do have a television contract with Spectrum, which is pay per view, except when the games are on national television, which we'll have about 4 games on. So we really can't go outside of that contract. The options are either it's a national television game, people can watch it, on any television. If not, it's through the pay-per-view vehicle.
Okay, a couple of specific questions. This is from Amy from Windward Side. She's asking about alcohol being sold at concessions and who's operating concessions. There was also a question about whether or not there's handicap access. I would assume there is.
Yeah, absolutely. We're ADA accessible, definitely handicap access. There's a lot of code and specifics about that. As far as alcohol, Sodexo is the concessionaire. Same ones are at the arena, and beer and wine will be available.
So let's talk a little bit more about some of these alternatives. I mean, I know within the sports community, no doubt, there's been a lot of discussion amongst your peers, let alone the fans that you talk to about, okay, if this is the scenario, if this is the situation, and this may go on for the next 2 or 3 years or so, what has been the discussion amongst you and your colleagues as far as what else could be done, what else need to be looked at, what may be some alternatives?
Yeah, the Stan Sheriff Center option is something that I've heard from day one, because from the beginning, as soon as you hear that the University of Hawaii football team is going to be playing on campus, you automatically know that you're not going to fit 50,000 people there. So how are you going to accommodate as many people as possible? Les Murakami Stadium is another one that I heard, where you see at the Sony Open a big jumbotron. Those inflatable TV screens that can have a big picture, and you could put that in center field, have people at Les Murakami Stadium. But as David talked about, those are things down the road. What all of these conversations that come up is really just showing that this is an opportunity for the University of Hawaii Athletics Department to create traditions and to create a new atmosphere of going to UH football games. Because as we've talked about a couple of times, with losing Aloha Stadium, this is a chance to almost begin a new start to UH football, because Aloha Stadium for UH, they were a tenant there. So they didn't control the game day atmosphere. They didn't control the PA system. They didn't control the music. They didn't control a lot of things. Now they can control everything that happens on campus at these games. So a lot of people would compare UH football to like an NFL game for many years, right? Because you don't have that college football feel in this big giant stadium without some of the daily traditions that you get if you're playing on campus with students. And so this is an opportunity. I mean, if you're going to be there for 4 years, there's a lot of things that you can do that had never been done for University of Hawaii football games, and it completely changed the face of what a game day experience is like going to a Rainbow Warrior game. And so, there's a lot of concerns, there's a lot of questions, but at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity to really make this something special for people and create traditions to where even if Aloha Stadium gets redone in the future, everything that you've done at UH over these next however many years it is, you can carry over to your new stadium and make it more of a college football experience.
So I know you're not a politician, but you've been involved in discussion and touched with the discussion of Aloha Stadium over the years, many years with your sports reporting. Are you surprised that it got to this point? What's your perspective on where we are now? And even though this may ultimately be a great thing for UH, that it got to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Stunned when it happened the way that it did. I think anyone that has ever gone to Aloha Stadium or has been covering a team or whatever it is, that there was an expiration date on Aloha Stadium, a venue that was built in 1975 that didn't really have any major renovations over the years, and so there aren't too many stadiums out there that are around as long as Aloha Stadium is without pumping millions and millions of dollars into it. So I'm not surprised that it happened. I'm surprised of how it happened, and especially given the circumstances where you had the pandemic season with no fans in attendance. It was heartbreaking for that to be the goodbye to Aloha Stadium, because even if the university had known that this was gonna happen, it would have been nice to even play a game, even if there were no fans in attendance, to be able to celebrate Aloha Stadium. But for UH to even play a game knowing that was the last one at Aloha Stadium, and that was a regular season game against UNLV, where I worked the Spectrum broadcast. We had no idea that we would never be back at Aloha Stadium, and Chevin Cordero's touchdown run would be the last by a Rainbow Warrior ever. And if they knew and if everybody knew, you could have given Aloha Stadium its proper goodbye in that way. And so there were so many things that went wrong, and there were so many heartbreaking things, but to me, symbolically, that was the saddest one, was that no one got to say goodbye to Aloha Stadium, a venue that's so iconic and so much a part of our state, especially in the sports landscape. So, truly heartbreaking.
And Dave, I want to tap you on that too a little bit, because you've been obviously part of the sports community for a really long time too. I would imagine that hits you too when you hear Rob talking about it in that way.
Yeah, I've been here since 1993, and I worked at UH before, from 93 to 99, and then I worked for the Bowl, ESPN, running the Hawaii Bowl, and I've been at a lot of major events there, and it is sad. It's the facility served us well. It's obviously aged and time to move on, but I think Rob brings up a good point. Not knowing that Chevin's touchdown run was the last touchdown for a lot of people, at that stadium. But we control what we can control. The other thing you talked about is the opportunity to create our own ambiance, and own environment, and own traditions at Clarence T.C. Ching Field, and things that we can bring with us possibly to the new stadium. So there's real opportunities. You got to look at the glass being half full, not half empty. So that's the only way to go, and I'm excited about those opportunities.
I'm going to circle back to that in just a little bit too, and get everybody's input on that, a little more on that, because I think that's a great point, especially during COVID. I think there's a lot of examples of people thinking outside the box now because of, in some ways, being forced to, but ultimately having a great result. But I want to get back to some of these viewer questions, and no surprise that we had questions coming up about tailgating and whether or not at the new location at UH, if there's going to be tailgating. I don't know if COVID is going to play into that, or if that is part of the plan. Otherwise, is there going to be an tailgating experience at UH football? This is Kalani asking in Manoa.
Well, there's not going to be. We've been looking. Besides COVID aside, which you have to pivot to whatever the guidelines are at the time. We're not looking at having tailgating in the parking lots for this year. But we are looking at doing some type of organized gatherings. Basically permitting where there might be some opportunities for putting tents up, doing some things on our fields. Whether that will happen this year, I would say it's not as likely this year. They're on our plans, but I think right now, we want to, you want to be respectful of the pandemic and not go too fast. One thing I know is, we're going to learn a lot the first week. I mean, Dylan mentioned that, and we got to continue to monitor. We're going to get better the second week than the first week, and by year 2, we'll be better than year 1. We have to learn. We're working on our operational plan with a lot of community involvement, a lot of people's input. But we know we're going to learn as we go, and we're going to have to pivot and just, what I say to our staff every day is to get 1% better a day or do one thing better each day. We're going to have to do a lot more of that than after each game. I'm glad we have 2 weeks between each game. That's a good
Reassess a little bit. And you led right into what was inevitable, that we had to talk a little bit more about COVID, especially what's been happening in recent weeks. So, Rob, you had mentioned that you had been at practice this morning. Mm-hmm. What did that look like? Because we're now, these numbers are jumping up, but we're kind of moving ahead with opening things up, not only for sports, but also for schools and whatnot. So what did that look like? And sort of what did you notice that was different? Or what will be, or which can you share with people that's going to be different?
Yeah, well, for me, I mean, my experience is, we're a part of the media that's invited there for certain parts of the practice. And so the entire practice isn't open to the media. We're there for the first 30 minutes and the last 30 minutes. And so we follow COVID protocols per the university. And so we don't get to roam wherever we want. We're staying in our designated areas. And so obviously, I've been covering this team for almost 20 years, so that alone is different than it's ever been. But in regards to the team, it was very different to just see them on the field. And I will say this, I heard it brought up earlier about the concern for noise. It's going to be loud because the sound carries, and I don't know what it is. And it could be that it's all metal bleachers and no one's sitting in it, and, who knows. But the sound carried. I mean, I heard coaches' voices just echoing throughout that stadium. And, at the time, I got excited because I was like, oh, this is going to be awesome. This is going to be nice and loud. And this is going to be, I know that other people are going to hear that and say, like, no, it's going to be too loud. It's gonna be loud. I live in the area, though. I live in Mo'ilili. So I guess my family would be affected by the noise. But I'm sure they're looking forward to it. But yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing is that we finally got to see the team on the field, and that field, the two-tone green pops. It's gorgeous. If you watch the coverage of covering this team at practice, you'll see it, and it's exciting. I gotta say, I've been going to University of Hawaii football games my whole life. As a child, my father and I in section red MM seats 1 and 2 in row 2.
Very specific.
Yeah, because there's the same seats every year, ever since I was a little kid. And so it will be exciting to see the team play on campus. And I think the shot of Diamond Head from one of the end zones when you're looking at, that is going to be a shot that is going to go viral every single week on Instagram, on Twitter, because it's going to be the most beautiful scenic shot in all of college football.
Okay, now Tanner and Dylan, I want to get to you in just a minute, but real quickly, since we're on the COVID topic here, I just want to get your comments overall as far as what's been happening and us hitting the games. But because we're in this COVID situation, because we have to take some precautions, what's going to be the experience for fans? Are they going to need to be vaccinated? Is there going to be some kind of proof? What are the contingency plans? Break it down for folks as far as what they can expect and what's in place.
We're continuing updating our plans, but right now the plan is that fans will need to be vaccinated to be able to attend. We're gonna have We have a Lumicide app, which you can upload your vaccine, your vaccine card to, and it can get verified. For people who don't have a smartphone, we'll have a mechanism at a gate for showing your vaccine card. I think masks will be contingent on the time when we get there, but like right now, I would say we would be masks outside along with the vaccine where we are today. The thing we hope for is that things do get better throughout the season and we can open up a little bit, but that's what we anticipate being from day one.
What happens if you become aware of COVID exposure at a game?
Yeah. The good thing about Lumicide and our ticketing system is you have some good tools for contact tracing. So you obviously have to look at the ticket locations, and then contact tracing can play into it. Good thing is outside is always better than inside as far as
True.
transmission.
Open stadium.
It's definitely a positive, and the vaccine, that's also it's not guaranteed at all. I mean, we know that it does transmit with people vaccinated, but a lot less percentages. I just heard today it was 6 out of 10,000 compared to 300 out of 10,000 who are unvaccinated.
So when you say you're
are,
checking folks with who that they need to be vaccinated, what do they need to do? Is it by would they need to have their license? Would they need to have their vaccination card? What will they need to have?
They need to have their vaccination card, and they need to upload it to. We have an app called Lumicite for the university. When you come
Do
on,
that on
you have to
Lumicite. Got it.
You have to go to a questionnaire saying if you have had any symptoms, have you had any contact, and then you have to upload your vaccine card. So you have to flash that to get in.
Okay, so let's turn to you, Dylan, and then also to you, Tanner, about the situation we're in now, the measures that are in place, and how the community is feeling about it. Are moods changing a little bit, or what's just the overall discussion as it stands?
One of the things that's really interesting about Manoa is that historically it's a political bellwether. And I don't just mean with elections, but it's a very historically middle-class community, and what you see is people who are very practical as a group, and there's a certain amount of caution. One of the things that was really notable, about Hawaii is that it's one of the worst states to opinion poll. Pollsters all over the country know that it's very difficult to gauge public opinion here. People can be reluctant to say what they think. Manoa, especially the back of the valley, supported Joe Biden in the presidential election at a far higher rate than anywhere else in the state. And even though it was Democratic leaning before, it shifted. And my anecdotal experience, knowing several hundred people in the valley closely and thousands of people loosely, is that was COVID. So there is fear about COVID, but people also want to be able to build community. And so that's where this really interesting balance with UH football, with other things that are going on in the community is kind of popping up, because we need to have ways to be connected. And one of the things that's actually come up in the discussions about TC Ching is people's nostalgia for either attending games, right, or watching back on K5, and watching the families, and they're in their T-shirts, they got the tea leaves, and people were doing something as a family. And Manoa is an aging community. It's an older community. And so many people, it's going to be difficult for them to attend a game in person, but they're still going to appreciate being able to watch. And so that's why when I'm asking questions about contracts for TV, it's not just about UH, it's actually also about the community, because we have so many people who are aging in home, or they're in a care home setting, because this is an older community by and large. And for the students, that opportunity is there, because I was a UH student, and students historically didn't want to do the shuttle out to Aloha Stadium. So now there's that opportunity to build community on campus. So the tailgating and the fear of COVID spreading at the events is a real concern. I work in disaster management. I am very hawkish on COVID, and I am not necessarily super optimistic about the short term. But at the end of this, we're going to have the opportunity, as Dave, as Rob, and Tanner have suggested, to have a stronger UH program that's more embedded in the community, that people in Manoa are particularly vested in, not just as alumni or taxpayers, but as neighbors.
Do you feel like you have enough information at this point as far as the measures that are going to be put in place when they get into these closer settings, that they will be protected enough in a reasonable sense with compared to what's happening in the community?
Well, I think one of the biggest questions is vaccination and vaccination mandates, and that's really a hot topic from state, county, hospitals all over. Hearing that Coach Graham did attend the Mountain West Conference meeting, I believe in Las Vegas, as was reported in the Star Advertiser, that the teams are going to participate in mandatory vaccination or else testing. And I believe it was 3 antigen tests per week or 1 PCR test. That's a delicate dance to do. I appreciate the seriousness of doing that. I know that the Rainbow Warriors also recently shifted back to, contact practice and training, because it was no contact for a long time. But the risk is there. I mean, the risk is there for all of us, and there's a large segment of the population that's hesitant about vaccines. So how that particularly affects the teams, I would actually ask it down to the level of a specific question like, North Carolina State University lost a game because of a COVID outbreak. So what would that mean if the Rainbow Warriors had a player who tested positive?
And I want to get to you, Tanner, in a minute, but Dave, I feel like I want to give you the opportunity to respond.
Yeah, well, I think, Dylan brings some good points. I mean, that's why I think it was July 28th, we're mandating vaccines for our student athletes.
Yep.
Now, so to compete, they have to have a vaccine. Now, there is a medical and religious exemption. For those people, their protocols will be different. They will have to be wearing masks. Maybe not when they're competing, then we have to wear masks. They'll have to be testing at a higher level. We're still looking at the degree. We might even up the testing levels on that to mitigate risk. And then there's the whole, when you're traveling, coming back, safe travels and all that, obviously. So usually there's an extra test when we're traveling. But that's why we mandated it with the medical and the religious exemptions to mitigate as much risk as possible. And obviously that's not easy for everyone. I understand people's opinions on whether they want to be vaccinated or not, but we feel that's the best thing to do for our community.
So Tanner, the student community, I mean, everybody's going back to class, or a lot of people are going back to class. We're having these events open up now where people can go to these events. What's everybody talking about as far as the student community? Do they feel that there are enough protections in place? Do they feel safe? Do they want more information? Give us a feel for the student voice right now with everything that's happening.
The fun thing about the University of Hawaii is that we are not a small school. We do have a rather large population, and with that, I think we do get a lot of variation whether or not people, are super down with getting vaccinated. Like I know me and my friends, all the people I'm close to, we're all double vaxxed. We were ready for it when it happened. But unfortunately, and it's well documented, there are a lot of younger people out there right now that either don't want to get vaccinated, don't know how to get vaccinated, or they just would feel like, oh, let's just wait this out. Let's see what happens. And I think that's a concern. Like, what's good is that UH does have that vaccination requirement unless, religious exemption. But I do know a close workmate of mine who, their child they're vaccinated, but then they have a child who doesn't want to get vaccinated. And it's really hard because it becomes like an education thing, and then it also becomes like an issue with like rollout. Like maybe if in the beginning we just said, hey, let's just give everyone the vaccine, but then there becomes all these issues of hindsight and all that stuff. Like a lot of great things could have been done before, but that's the great thing about hindsight. With students right now, I feel like it's just a matter of we're finally coming back to campus. I do know there are more in-person classes now than there were in spring, than there were in fall. And we're going to have more in-person classes as the semester goes on. Hopefully we're back to normal. And I know a lot of people just want to get back into the classroom, whether it be to, talk with another person. That isn't just like private messaging people on Zoom. Right. When during a lecture, you're just like, oh, this guy blows, all that stuff. But it's just a whole matter. You just want to be with people again. Yeah. And I remember when the lockdown ended, when we were kind of like, yeah, you could probably go out, just make sure to wear a mask. Mm-hmm. I'm sure everyone agrees that you were happy just to see another person outside of your home. And it's just a matter of, we want to connect with other people. And especially with community, whether it be Manoa, whether it be, like just Hawaii, whether it be the mainland, we just all want to cultivate these relationships. And that's what's so amazing about community, is that we can have something that we can build around. And so in Manoa, we have a unique opportunity in having a large university. And so it cultivates either the young population, we have the older aging population, Manoa, and that leaks out into kind of like the workforce in Honolulu, Waikiki, and it like just emanates out. So I think students right now, it's a real mixed bag. You have to be vaccinated. And I know to be in a dorm room, you've had to have vaccinations before. I know when I went to Colorado, I needed to make sure, I have this shot, I have this shot, I have this shot. Oh, I didn't have this shot yet. I have to go get this shot right now. So I personally don't understand the issue of it's just one more shot.
Right.
And I understand where I know some people's concerns is that I've heard like, but it's not FDA approved. But we just don't know yet.
We could definitely go down this rabbit hole.
It's a whole rabbit hole.
Easy rabbit hole to go down. We only got about 5 minutes left.
Oh, I'm so sorry
I'm going to
about
start
that.
the next hour, and then we can talk about it again. I promise you.
But in the end,
hour, right, Chuck? Well, let me get to a couple questions here, just because I don't want to miss it. But thank you, because that's a very important opinion and a very realistic opinion. Really quickly about the Division I NCAA status, Dave. My understanding is that for it to maintain that status, it needs to be 15,000 in attendance, paid attendance, correct? So how is that going to play out? Is that going to be a potential concern as to whether or not this could affect the NCAA standing because of the capacity that's only capable at this point?
Yeah, well, the fortunate thing is there's a waiver to that rule for 2020 and 2021 because of COVID. So the clock doesn't start until 22. So it's a 2-year cycle. You have to average 15,000 over 2 years. So that's why we're trying to get the 15,000 in year 2 or 2022, so we can meet that requirement by 23.
All right. Well, I want to, with the few minutes that we have left, I definitely want to get back to, bringing everybody back in some shape or form and working with what you have right now. And you're talking about kind of thinking of some different ways, whether it be now or next year or the next few years, whether it's if potentially if it still is at UH, thinking outside the box and thinking about what other ways could you possibly expand what's happening at UH right now and how these facilities can be used. What's the talk? What's the talk in the locker room as far as where this could possibly go? What has this generated as far as different ideas as we move into the future? I'll turn to you on that one, Dave.
Yeah, okay, I'll start. The opportunity to be in on-campus football is exciting. The opportunity to engage with the university community, with the band, and the team. There's a lot of traditions that a lot of schools do where they march through the campus on game day, or the band marches through, and you engage people on it. And we kind of haven't had that because we're playing at Aloha Stadium. So, and we're really limited by our imagination. Coach Graham has some great ideas about involving students. It might be tough with COVID right now, but involving them, leading the team out, a lot of students, so there's a lot of cool things we can do. Rob DeMello's a good guy to talk about this. He's got a lot of creative ideas.
Too much.
They're all great. Some of them I need a bigger checkbook for, but there really are opportunities to create traditions, and that's something that actually Rob and I have talked a lot about. How can you engage the community? Because it is special. You got iconic Diamond Head behind you. You got Les Murakami Stadium. We've got the softball stadium next, the Stan Sheriff Center. There's a lot of opportunities, and we're really limited by our imaginations. And when you control the sounds, sights, and smells of your venue, there's a lot of opportunity, and that's exciting.
And we got maybe about 20 seconds each on a little round robin here, kind of on that same sort of topic as we sort of move forward in our current reality. What would you like to see happen? What's on your mind as far as how we could possibly move forward?
Yeah, well, so ultimately, having places where residents can gather, where they're not limited to just that small facility as it currently exists, right? You know how like in Waikiki, there's residents who go watch the movies on the big screen at the beach, right? Obviously, that's probably not the best location because it's relatively small, but are there places, especially for the neighbor islands, knowing that they're not going to be able to all attend here? Manoa Marketplace doesn't have a lot of, sports bars at the moment, but
And I have a feeling everybody's
Yeah.
going to have a lot of ideas. We only have
Right.
about 20 seconds left for each. So
Yeah.
hold that thought. And just a few ideas from you as we move forward.
I'll give some quickies. I want to see the return of the haka. I miss that a lot. I don't know if that was a stadium thing, but I don't know. It's just an idea out there. It's cool. I love it.
And a few seconds to you, Rob. Your thoughts.
I just like the word community has come up so much. And I'd like to see more University of Hawaii outreach to the community that they play in. Because football games will be played there, I think there's a great opportunity. Pucks Alley, Old Stadium Park, you can have pep rallies, you can have the people that live in that community feel like that is their team and that they're a part of something special. So I think that's a great opportunity.
All right. Thank you so much, all of you. Mahalo to you for joining us tonight. And we thank our guests, University of Hawaii Athletics Director David Matlin, KHON2 Sports Director Rob DeMillo, UH Mānoa student Tanner Hayworth, and Dylan Armstrong, Chair of the Manoa Neighborhood Board. Thank you again to all of you. Great discussion. All right, next week on Insights, from shootings and burglaries to purse snatching and catalytic converters being ripped off cars, crime on Oahu declined last year during the height of the pandemic, but is it back on the rise? We'll ask HPD, the newly elected Honolulu prosecutor, and community members. Please join us then. I'm Laurie Mata for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Ahui ho.